It's a good day to be here, isn't it? Oh, and it feels so good outside. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, my Lord. It feels so good. I'm just blessed of the Lord to be here today and so thankful for the distance that we have gone in the study of the Word. We are in the United Kingdom stage, so if you have your Bibles, turn with me, please, to 1 Samuel, the 26th chapter. So we had fun last Sunday as we were discussing Nabal, Abigail, and David, and in that story. So we were talking last Sunday and talking about David and his early life, and talking about how at this point in David's life, he could be very resentful because he is being persecuted. He is on the run. He is in exile for nothing. He has done nothing to deserve the treatment that he is being given by King Saul. And we talked about resentment and how it is easy to get, and sometimes it's kind of hard to get rid of. And we talked about how you, as a person, as a Christian, as a believer, how we all get resentment. We all get resentment. And then the challenge for us is to acknowledge the resentment so that we are able to deal with it in a realistic manner, not to act like it doesn't exist, because it does. And so from David's life, from his exile, we learn about anger. We learn that through Saul. We learn what happens when you have anger that you haven't dealt with. We learn about jealousy. We learn about envy from Saul. We learn about forgiveness in this story. We learn about mercy, and that's something that we see extended to King Saul time and time again by David. And so it would behoove us then to take a look at the story when we talk about extending mercy, because all of us at some point in our life will need someone to extend mercy to us. So it would behoove us then to think about that when it comes time for us, and for us to be merciful to someone else. Someone's going to need your mercy as well. And then from this story, we will learn about selfishness. And you see, people are the same. People have been the same down through the years. Now, we talk about this day and this time and how things are with the people these days. People been like that all the time. People have been like that all the time. People have been rude down through the years. People have been selfish down through the years. People have had bad tempers down through the years. And so how are you going to deal with it? That's the thing, though. So how will you deal with what comes up when it comes up to you? So we're in chapter 26 now. David is married Abigail, and Abigail is a happy camper right about now because she got rid of a fool and she got a king. And so we thank God for that. Amen. I'm rejoicing with her. Praise God. Amen. And so we're in chapter 26, and in chapter 26, we had said that Saul had spies in the land and David had spies in the land. They both had spies in the land trying to keep tabs on each other, because David is trying to keep tabs on Saul because he's in fear of his life being threatened, and Saul's trying to keep tabs on David because he just want to kill him. And so now David, he was running. He was trying to hide among the Ziphites, but now the Ziphites betrayed David to Saul. The Ziphites betrayed David to Saul. And so here in chapter 26, and the Ziphites came unto Saul, I'm in verse 1, came unto Saul to Gibeah, saying, doth not David hide himself in the hill of Hakilah, which is before Jeshimon? And so they told Saul where he was. And so, of course, we know Saul grabbed up his men, 3,000 of his men, and they headed that way. But now David, can you advance that for me, Jackie? David was already far ahead of Saul because his spies had located Saul's camp, and David was safe in the desert. It says, now then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel. And we talked about how you're taking 3,000 men, You're the king. You're taking 3,000 men out of your kingdom where you should be at the kingdom watching what's going on. But you're taking 3,000 men for one man. One man. And you got business that you should be taking care of in the kingdom, but you're so busy, you're so sad. Do you see how your emotions can run amok? Do you see how your emotions can take control of you? How anger, how jealousy and envy can make you do things kind of out of the ordinary? I'm just thinking about myself. When I get overly emotional, I do some things that I wouldn't normally do. I say some things that I wouldn't normally say. And when you say things, y'all, it's too late to say, uh-oh. Because when they go out, you know what? It's in the atmosphere. It's in the atmosphere. And it's in that seared into that person's head. I know some things that's been said to me long time ago and many times ago, and I still remember some of those things. And so your emotions a lot of times can get the best of you and make you do some things that's just really crazy. And so he went to the wilderness of Ziph, trying to seek out David. And then he pitched in the hill of Hakilah, which is before Jeshimon by the way. But David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. And so now, Saul and his men, they are running, but you can't run forever. You got to take some rest sometime. You got to rest sometimes. And so he comes to a point now where he's in camp. Saul is in camp with his men. They're in camp. And so they take a rest. Okay, look at verse 5. And David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched. And David beheld the place where Saul lay, and Abner, the son of Ner, the captain of his host, and Saul lay in the trench, and the people pitched round about him. So they're like in the middle of the camp. Okay, then they're trenched around. They're like in the middle of the camp. So they're sleeping in the middle of the camp. But we're going to see here how David and Abishai were able to penetrate where Saul and Abner were laying. And so, again, we're going to see, do you remember the first incident where David could have taken Saul's life, but he extended him mercy. He let him know then. He cut off his robe and said, look, I had your life in my hand. I had your life in my hand. All I had to do was just smite you out. And not only that, but the people around me were egging me on, just urging me to go ahead and kill you. Then I would be through with you. But I wouldn't do that. He studied trying to clear his name. He studied trying to let Saul know that I don't have any malice in my heart for you. You're the one that you hate me, but I don't hate you. And so a lot of times, and I say it again, we try to figure out about people, but your people are hard to figure out. People are hard to figure out. Now, we're all the same, but sometimes it's hard to figure out. Well, you're wondering, what have I done to this person to make them feel like this about me? And of course, David knew he had not done anything. And so we're at a point again where he has an opportunity to extend mercy to his enemy again. Well, Saul considers him an enemy, but David doesn't. It says, and David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched, and David beheld the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the captain of his host, and Saul lay in the trench, and the people pitched round about him. Then answered David and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, who will go down with me to Saul to the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with thee. So they came by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster, but Abner and the people lay round about him. So the spear that at his head as a symbol of his authority. So he's sleeping in the camp. The spear would not be too far from him, right there at his head. I'm the king, but I'm asleep. I'm the king, and so he's letting you know that's just a sign of his authority. And so it comes to a place at verse 8. Look at this. Abishai says to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him. Let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him the second time. And David said to Abishai, destroy him not. For who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David still had the presence of mind to know that God had placed Saul in the position that he's in as king. David had the presence of mind to know that if I went against him, I would be going against God. It's just like when the people said, "Give us a king," and Samuel told God told Samuel, "Look, they're not rejecting you; they're rejecting me." And so David had the presence of mind to know that I can't do that because God has placed him there. He's God's anointed. He may not be acting like it, but he's God's anointed for this time, for this season. That's who God wants in that place. And when he gets ready, it's going to be over with. It'll be over with. And so David said to Abishai, destroy him not. David said, furthermore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. And actually, David's prophesying there because that's really what's going to happen. And so Abishai was sure that it was God's will that he would kill Saul and put an end to his selfish rule because, in fact, the rule that Saul had been a selfish one. He was out for himself. And his persecution of David was just relentless. And so, as I said earlier, David didn't see him as an enemy, but he saw him as the Lord's anointed. And so instead of taking Saul's life, David took his spear and his water jug. And so look over here at verse 11. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth mine hand against the Lord anointed, but I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away, and no man saw it nor knew it, neither awake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them. And so the Lord saw fit to do that, again, in an effort to show Saul that David was having mercy. David was having mercy on him. And so let's look at verse 12. No, not verse 12. I'm sorry, verse 13. Then David went over to the other side and stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great space being between them. It's the same thing he did when he cut off the robe. You know, he got far enough away, then he called back. He got far enough away and then called back, and he cried to the people and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, answerest thou not, Abner? Then now look, and so he's also showing Abner is supposed to be your bodyguard. Abner is supposed to be watching over you. You see what kind of help you got, don't you? He's supposed to have your back, but he's sleeping just as hard as you're sleeping. And so I was able to come into the camp. I was able to get your spear and your cruse of water. He didn't wake up, and you didn't either. And so, except the Lord watched the city. You see? And so David said to Abner, art not thou a valiant man? And who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore then have thou not kept thy Lord the king? For there came one of the people in to destroy the king thy Lord. This thing is not good that thou hast done. As the Lord liveth, ye are worthy to die, because you have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is and the cruse of water that was at his bolster? Look, I got his stuff. And so you need to understand that you're not doing your job. And so here again, David is pleading with Saul. He's pleased with Saul because he's tired, y'all. David's been on the run for years. At this point, it has been years. And so he's tired. And you know, just to be in exile and not to have somewhere that you could just be still. Be still. And so he's on the run. He's on the run. Not just being on the run. That's not so bad. But being on the run and you got to study. You looking behind you. You know, every time you turn around, you can't be anywhere settled because you don't know what's getting ready to happen. And then not only that, now he has people in his care. David has people. Remember when he was in the cave, how the people came to him? And so now he has people in his care. So now he's tired. He's coming to a point where he's tired. And so he's going to plead with Saul. He says, wherefore doth my Lord thus pursue after his servant? I'm in verse 18. Now let me go back to verse 17 because Saul, remember, he would have a moment of clarity. And, you know, he would go between calling him the son of Jesse. That's when he was really upset and hot. He would go between calling him the son of Jesse and then my son David. That's when he had calmed down. Okay. And so at this point now, David's like, okay, look, I got your spear and I got your cruse of water. Is that my son David? It is my voice, O Lord, O King. And so David is still asking, for what have I done? Or what evil is in mine hand? He says, now therefore I pray thee, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord have stirred thee up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance. And so when you go on down through the scriptures, go down to verse 21. Let me take a sip of water. In verse 21, then Saul said, I have sinned. Okay, a moment of clarity. Thank God for a moment of clarity. He says, I have sinned. He comes to a point now where he realizes again, he acknowledges his sin. He acknowledges what he's done. He says, in verse 23, the Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness, for the Lord delivereth thee into my hand. This is David talking today. But I would not stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulations. Then Saul said to David, blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things. Finally, after all this time, finally, he's acknowledging, you got it. The Lord, the Lord is doing what he sees fit. So he says, thou shalt both do great things and also shall still prevail. So David went on his way and Saul returned to his place. So they're at a point now. So he's stopped pursuing him, and it was time. It was time for him to stop. And so we go on to the next chapter. But what do we learn about that? Do we learn the devil doesn't really give up? Y'all know that? The devil doesn't give up. And so he's steady. He's steady on his job. He's steady doing what he does. And so we need to be steady on our job, Steady in the word. Steady in prayer. Steady being faithful of assembling ourselves together. Doing what we can to uplift ourselves and to build ourselves up and encourage ourselves. And not just encourage ourselves, to encourage each other. Because life gets hard. We might not be in exile, but we got some stuff going on that we feel like we're cut off from everybody, don't we? And so it would just behoove us to be steady on our job. And so David had been a fugitive for about 7 years. And so now in chapter 27, he goes to live among the Philistines. He goes to Gath. He goes to Gath. Uh, uh, David said here, you know, again, it was starting to, as I said earlier, you're on the run for so long, that could be depressing. It can be depressing. And like I said, he had over 600 men to care for. And then if he had 600 men, they have families, you know, he could have several, 2 or 3,000 people that he had to have to watch over or had to be mindful of. And so it's hard being on the run with that many people. So that could get depressing. And so now he wanted somewhere to settle down, somewhere to settle down. And so here he chooses to go to live at Gath, or live among the Philistines. Okay, so he fled to Gath here, and he deals with King Achish. Or Achish, and David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. And Saul shall despair of me to seek me any more in any coast of Israel. So shall I escape out of his hands. And so David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his wise men, every man with his household, even David and his wives. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. Why do you think that? You know, David goes to Gath, and Saul sought no more for him. Why do you think at this point he sought no more for him? I would think just because of the sheer I think they were just scared of the Philistines. You know, they were just that. Remember, that's how David entered into this whole thing to begin with, because of the great army that they had and because of their strength. And so I just felt like maybe Saul didn't even feel like bothering with them. You know what, David, you got this. You go, because their army is just too mighty. It's just too much, too mighty and too much. Okay, so
Don't you think it was strange that they allowed David to dwell with them, because he was the one who killed one of their own?
Yeah, exactly. And so after we're actually going to look at this, I think probably he was accepting of David because David's reputation had preceded him, and David was now known as a great a man of war, a great man of war. So then if they received him, that would mean that he would think, which is the basis of the story in chapter 27, that David was in alliance with him, when in fact he was not. But let's see how prudent, how skillful David was and what he did. And so he goes to Gath. He goes to Achish, the king. David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men. I'm in verse 3. Every man with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul, I've read that already, that David was fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. And then when he went to Achish, he says, if I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. But why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? And so with David having all of those people with him, Achish just agreed. He went ahead and agreed to give him a city, and he gave him Ziklag. Okay, so now David, he goes to Ziklag. He's living in Philistine. And as we a good segue into this, the question that Jean asked. So now the king is thinking, okay, he's here. He's going to fight with me. He's going to fight against my enemies. But David deceived him. And so I have a question to y'all then. Okay, so basically what David does is he lies to him. David goes out and starts, um, instead of killing the enemy, which would be the Israelites, he's killing all of Achish's allies. So then there were enemies. You remember when they came over into the promised land and God told them to get rid of everything? You remember that? Well, then there were still some of them around. So David, he starts killing them. And he's killing them, and the Achish is none the wiser. He's thinking, he thought they were attacking cities and towns in Judah, when in reality they were raiding the towns and camps of the allies of Achish. He was wiping out, as I said, those people that Joshua and his successors had failed to exterminate when they came over into the land. And so he was eliminating, look at this, look at how shrewd David was. He was eliminating the danger of any survivor, taking the word back to Gath, letting them know that David was a liar. So my question to you is, was it okay for him to lie? Was it okay for him to lie like he was killing Achish's enemies? Was it okay? That's a question. Yeah, it reminds me of, pastors say, anytime we all a lie. It just depends on the question we're asked. So was it okay for David to lie in this instance?
If he had not, then the Philistines would have decided to kill him. So, in order to save his life, I think, and then he may have lied out of fear.
Okay. All right, I'm listening. Okay.
He could have, it's possible that he could have lied to this king Achish out of fear, because he only had 600 men, whereas Achish had no telling how many. So I think he lied because he was a little fearful.
Okay. All right. Okay, and now look at the lie. Look at it, verse 10. Yeah, and anybody else, let me read this. Listen what it says. And Achish said, "Whither have you made a road today?" And David said, "Against the south of Judah, and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites." And David saved neither man nor woman alive to bring tidings to Gath, saying, lest they should tell on us, saying, so did David, and so will be his manner all the while he dwelleth in the country of the Philistines. In other words, he didn't save anybody because he didn't want, them to tell him and say, you can't trust David. And like you were saying, and if you can't trust David, that means you need to kill David. So was that a good tactic for that lying? Is lying ever a good tactic to use?
Well, if you get scared enough, you will. If you get scared and you tell it without thinking, and then if you've had time to think about it, you say, oh, why did I tell that big lie? But at the time, you were scared. I think David, living with those giants, got scared.
And then, like you were saying too, David he had more people to be concerned about than just himself.
Right.
And I think that makes a difference when you have the responsibility, when you have people that you are responsible for. It makes a difference. And so, Now, people have said that this lie was a military tactic that he used. Well, but in my mind, a lie is just a lie. And so I don't know that God would condone a lie, but he allowed this to happen for David to do what he did. And so he did. He was deceitful. He was deceitful, but it was in such a way that he was able to go ahead. He was acting like already David's acting like the king that he had been anointed to be. So he's out, he's fighting, he's getting rid of those enemies of God's people, which is what Saul should have been doing. Saul should have been doing, but he was, he had been in hot pursuit of David, and he was forsaking his position as king because of being a hothead, just a hothead, and because of his jealousy. So now he is talking to, when he talks to Achish, he steady having him thinking without really saying, without really truly saying what he was doing. You see, he was just telling him just enough to lead Achish along, just to lead him along like he was on his side, to really make him think that he was on his side, when in essence it was just a ploy, to do what he had to do. Because look at verse 12. And Achish believed David, saying, he hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor him. Therefore he shall be my servant forever. He shall be my servant forever. Okay, so now it came to pass in those days, I'm in chapter 28, that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight against Israel. And Achish said unto David, know thou assuredly that thou shalt go out with me to battle, thou and thy men. Okay, so, you got to join up with me because, I've given you Ziklag, I've given you the city, and, you've been going out fighting my enemies, he thought. So now you got to come with me now. And David said to Achish, surely thou shalt know what thy servant can do. See, he never did say, surely thy servant will know what thy servant can do against your enemies. He never did say that. He just left a room open enough. And sometimes that's the way we lie. We just tell just enough so we'll say we wasn't lying. Okay, let me just talk for myself. Just say enough, just enough, so well, that's not really lying. And that's the way David did it. He left it open-ended. Surely thy servant will know. Surely thee will know what thy servant can do. And Achish said to David, therefore will I make thee keeper of mine head forever. Got him thinking he all the way for him. And so again, they mentioned that Samuel is dead. Mention again that Samuel is dead, and that's important because Saul is still king. And Saul has to get ready to fight. And remember, I said that Saul, he's just been scared of the Philistines the whole time. Okay? So the Philistines, they're getting ready to battle. And now Saul, he's scared again. So now Samuel's dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, even in his own city. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land. Okay, so now we come to a point where they're getting ready to fight. And everybody that were familiar spirits, those people that talk to the dead, those people who were witches, those people who believed in witchcraft, they had put them all out of the land because the law of Moses condemned that. If you go over to Exodus, the 22nd chapter, Exodus 22 and 18, we'll run just a few scriptures just to show you. Exodus 22 and 18, it simply says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. You see that? Okay, look at Leviticus 19 and 31. Leviticus 19 and 31. Are you there? It says, regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Go to Leviticus, the 20th chapter and the 6th verse. Right there, right across from it. And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits and after wizards to go a whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul and will cut him off among his people. And finally, go to Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter. Deuteronomy 18, and take a look at verse 9. It says, when thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that uses divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination and unto the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. For these nations which thou shalt possess hearkened unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee so to do. Okay, so in essence, so you go back here. Saul had gotten rid of all of them. The law of Moses says so. God was against that because God said, why would you go looking for a word from somebody else when you have me as your God and I have all the word that you need? I'm all the God that you need. You don't need to go anywhere else looking for anybody else to pull up a spirit when I have all that you need. So he had expelled those people, but now what we see is that Saul was looking for a word from Samuel's gone. So he needs to have a word from the Lord because he's going to fight the Philistines. He's going to fight up his enemies. So he's looking for a word from the Lord. And so it says here in verse 5, when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. He just couldn't get a word anywhere. And so what does he do? Oh, ye a little faith. What he does, he goes to, they evidently, when they started getting rid of the witches and they started getting rid of them, they left one because she was here. And so he finds her, the Witch of Endor. And Saul said unto his servants, seek me a woman that hath the familiar spirit. Now you gotten rid of them all, but now you're going to seek the very one that you got rid of. Won't the devil make you do it? He will make you do it. And so his inability to hear from God, coupled with the fear that he had of the Philistines, caused him to go out to seek for help. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman that hath the familiar spirit at Endor. And so now he disguised himself because, you don't want to be seen as a king. You got to go down to the witch at Endor. So he takes off all his kingly stuff You know, he puts on some type of disguise and he goes down there to talk to the woman. And he said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up, whom I shall name unto thee. And the woman said unto him, Behold, thou knowest what Saul hath done, how he hath cut off those that have familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life, to cause me to die? And so the woman, you know, she wanted to be sure that this wasn't a trap to catch her and condemn her because of it being against the law, of which we just read. And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, As the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. And then the woman said, Whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, Bring me up Samuel. Now, something he wants Samuel to come back from the dead to talk to him. Would he listen to Samuel when Samuel was alive? But now, because you can't hear from the Lord. But you go always, you didn't see the extent that he has gone because of the fear that he has in his heart. And y'all, I'm telling you, fear, just like anger and just like jealousy, fear will make you do some things that you would not ordinarily do. Yes, yes. Fear will make you do some things that you just, just some out of the ordinary things. And so, when the woman saw Samuel, because he came. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. Now, he asked for it, but she wasn't really expecting to see him. Mm-hmm. So Samuel came, and she's like, you tricked me. You Saul. You tricked me. And so the king said unto her, Be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, What form is he of? And he said, An old man cometh up. And she said, An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived, because the woman saw it, Saul didn't. Saul Samuel. Saul did not. The woman perceived, or Saul perceived, that it was Samuel, and he stooped his face to the ground and bowed himself. And so now he begins to have a conversation with Samuel. Begins to have a conversation. And Samuel asked him, Why hast thou desired me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I'm sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me, and answered me no more, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I've called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. And so, it's funny now, you at a point, you come to this point in your life, and this is kind of a sad story for Saul. He spent his time, all the things that he could have done. That's why we don't ever want to, we don't want to get to a point in our life where we look back with regret, because your life is moving on. I heard Mother say this month just went by so fast. It really, truly did. And I'm telling y'all, the older you get, the faster the time goes. It really does. And so, but you don't want to get to a point in your life where you look back on regrets and you think, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. So now Saul is at this point in his life where you come to the point now, it's just kind of a sad story. This is what you have been reduced to. You're the king, but now you've been reduced to putting on a disguise, going to seek counsel from a witch, having her to bring up Samuel, somebody who tried to tell you what was right when he was living. But now you're trying to bring him back, and he can't rest in peace because you got him all messed up.
For my benefit, instead of calling him Saul, I just call him Self.
Come on now.
That's exactly what Self is.
Come on now. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And so Samuel, they began to have this conversation. And when they have this conversation, Samuel begins to tell him, Saul, you brought this all on yourself. You know, you were disobedient. God told you to go down and to kill all of the Amalekites. You left some there. You did what you wanted to do. You've been selfish the whole time you've been king. You know, you did this to yourself. And so he begins to tell him, you know, it's a sad end to a story, because now you calling me up from the dead. You and your sons are getting ready to join me. And you know, we always said sometimes, you know, it's a game sometimes we play, what would you do if you knew this was your last day on earth? What would you do? And so, you know, Samuel told them, you're going to die in battle, you and your sons. And so Saul, you know, he'd been fasting. I don't know, maybe he had come to a point now, you know, we fast when we think we really want to hear from the Lord. When you think the Lord really wants, we do whatever we can. Fast 40 days, pray 40 nights, trying to hear from the Lord. But then, you know what? His time is over. His time is over. His time is gone. And so he'd been fasting, and when Samuel told him that, you know, he just fell down, because he's just weak from fasting and weak from fear. Again, just scared. And so the poor woman, the witch, she said, now, look, you need to eat something, you know. You walk around here, you come down here and mess me up. Well, you need to eat something. Verse 23 says, but he refused and said, I will not eat. But his servants together with the woman compelled him, and he hearkened unto their voice. So he arose from the earth and sat upon the bed. And the woman had a fat calf in the house, and she hasted and killed it, and took flour and kneaded it, and did bake unleavened bread thereof. And it says, and she brought it before Saul and before his servants, and they did eat. Then they rose up and went away that night. And so we'll finish up with 1 Samuel next Sunday. Tragic end to a story of a king. But then you get ready to have a transition to the greatest king that Israel ever had. Give the Lord a hand praise, everybody.